Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this, our July Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. I spend a fair amount of time, and have for many decades, spent a lot of time on college campuses. And a characteristic of college campuses for decades has been the immense quantity and variety of leftist literature that is posted on the bulletin boards on college campuses around America. If you haven't done it recently, I would urge you just to go through a college campus and go into the buildings and look at the things that are on the bulletin boards. Dozens and dozens of leftist organizations of all stripes, some groups that you've heard of, some that are so obscure that you will not have heard of them, and they are everywhere. However, this morning's Washington Times has an article from California about a student at California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo. This young man named Steve Hinkle went into the university's multicultural center and put on the bulletin board an approved poster, that is, the university approved it. The poster was advertising a speech by conservative black author Mason Weaver, promoting his book, It's Okay to Leave the Plantation. Well, you would think that with all the leftist information that is regularly available on virtually every campus in America, that this would not have caused a sensation. However, some leftist students there were so outraged, they said that this was a disruptive act. I mean, all it said was, it's okay to leave the plantation. The name of his book, come here, Mason Weaver, Wednesday, November 13th, Business Silo, 7:30 p.m. That's all it said. The university, what did the university do? They forced Mr. Hinkle into an official hearing before the student's Office of Judicial Affairs and issued sanctions against him for this disruptive act. Now, that offends your sense of justice, it offends my sense of justice. However, it is consistent with the atmosphere on American college campuses today and consistent with the activities and really oppression that the administrators and the faculty perpetrate on college campuses all across America. Most of you know that we have a campus leadership program here at the Leadership Institute where we help conservative students go out on their own campuses, recruit other conservatives, and organize an independent conservative educational group on their campus. Each of these are independent groups. We are now up to 256 independent conservative campus groups that our staff have helped organize on campuses in 42 states. And surprisingly, even the major media have begun to give publicity to this. Just this year, there was a full-page story in Time magazine about the group that our staff helped organize at the University of California at Berkeley, and their very interesting newspaper, the California Patriot. On May 7th, the Los Angeles Times ran a major story, a feature story focused on a student publications workshop we conducted at the University of California, at Wingate University in North Carolina. That school was held at the deliciously named Jesse Helms Center. But it was a terrific and fair story. And they ran photographs of kids who were there, and they were photogenic kids and they were smiling. What one would not have expected in years past. And this article was syndicated by the Los Angeles Times and ran as well in the Chicago Tribune, the Seattle Times, the Detroit News, the Baltimore Sun, and the Charlotte Observer, and perhaps other papers. Those are the ones that we know ran that syndicated story. Then on May 25th, that bastion of establishment media, the New York Times, in its New York Times magazine, ran a cover story focused on a campus leadership program group that our staff had helped organize at Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. And it was a very long story, a very long story. And like the stories in the Los Angeles Times and even in Time magazine, all the conservative students that were presented as intelligent, committed, feisty, and having a great time fighting the left on campus. And one of the services that the Leadership Institute offers, which I want all of you to bear in mind, is that any conservative student in America can come to the Leadership Institute, call us up here in Arlington, Virginia, contact us at our website, and we can help you organize conservative activities and fellow conservative students on your campus. We're at 256 active groups now, and I confidently predict there will be a dramatic increase in the number of these independent conservative campus groups in the fall semester. To date, the Leadership Institute has trained this year 1,952 students in 76 schools, and we placed 24 conservative job seekers through our free employment placement service. You have before you on your table our calendar of upcoming training programs. I encourage you to look at that and consider attending one of our educational schools here or elsewhere around the country. And we also have before you a postcard advertising the upcoming 32nd Annual National Conservative 4th of July Soiree, which will be held at Bull Run Park on the afternoon of July 4th. Please consider attending. It's a wonderful event that will bring together local and national conservatives for a day of celebrations. I'd like to ask Joel Brewer now to get up and say a few words about the soiree. Joel, are you at hand?
How are y'all doing this morning? Very good. I'll be brief. Before you on your table, you've got a postcard that details and outlines what we're going to be doing at the soiree this Friday. And if any of you guys have ever been before, I don't have to tell you what a great event it is. And this is your invitation. I do want to give you some details we didn't have last month when we did the update. We have solidified, as you'll see there, our two speakers. We're going to be giving the third annual Patriots Award to Mr. Paul Wyrick. And then Dr. Lee Edwards will be delivering a keynote speech. So if you haven't heard those guys before, you're in for a treat. You'll also notice again, we want to reemphasize this. We are at a new location this year. The folks at Fort Hunt State Park wanted to devote some of their security services to the mall. So we're moving to Bull Run. If you've ever been out to Bull Run, it's a great place. It's actually in many ways going to be a better setting. Notice that parking will be charged to cars that aren't registered in certain counties or cities, so make sure you look at the back of this. And we will have signs along the way on, I guess it'll be Route 29, the exit 52 off 66 that you take. There'll be signs showing you how to get there. We'll also have a sign for some of the folks who haven't gotten the message. We'll have a sign out at Fort Hunt State Park directing everybody that the soiree is indeed 50 miles the other way, so hopefully they'll figure it out. That's all. We hope to see you guys this Friday, and thank you for letting me say it.
Thank you, Joel. I want to take this occasion to thank the Leadership Institute donors, because without your generosity and support, our institute could not continue to grow and train the number of students whom we train and train them to be as successful as they are. And so I thank all of you, donors to the Leadership Institute, for your dedication and hard work in behalf of the Leadership Institute. Now I present Kristen Lindley for an invocation and a pledge of allegiance. Kristen is an intern at the Employment Placement Service here at the Leadership Institute. She was born in Plano, Texas, graduated from Southern Methodist University in Dallas. She graduated with a BA in psychology and a minor in statistical science. She came to the Leadership Institute, as she said, to help her get her foot in the door for a career in politics. Her passion is defending our Second Amendment rights. Kristen?
Please bow your heads and join with me in prayer. Almighty God, thank you so much for this wonderful day. We thank you, Father, for Morton Blackwell and his vision which he has put into action, enabling all of us to share in this excellent breakfast in our mission. Father, thank you for the opportunity for us to listen to a rising national leader of public policy, Mr. Ed Gillespie, discuss the critical issues so important to our minds and our hearts. We thank you for the courage, the wisdom, and leadership he portrays as he moves on to the national scene to support our president and our party. Open up our hearts, Lord, and allow each of us to glorify you in everything as we learn and listen. In Jesus' name we pray. Now please stand with me as we say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Now I'm going to present to you Matt Lewis for an update of the Grassroots Department. While working here at the Leadership Institute as our Grassroots Activist Schools Director, Matt has trained thousands of conservative candidates and activists how to win. He has also lectured for numerous organizations, including the RNC's Campaign Management College, Regent University, and Concerned Women for America. In 2002, Campaigns and Elections magazine selected Matt as a, quote, rising star of politics. Matt grew up in Maryland, graduated from Shepherd College in West Virginia, and has a BS degree in political science. Matt Lewis.
All right. Thank you very much. It's good to be here. I just wanted to tell you briefly a little bit about the Grassroots Activist School and what we do. It occurs to me that a lot of you here today probably have heard of the Grassroots School, but you may not have ever been to one, and if you haven't, I'll talk to you later on. You may not have been to one, and so you may not know exactly what we do, so I wanted to tell you just a little bit about what we do. As she's doing that, a couple things we do here that are unique in Grassroots is we train mostly adults. And I know a lot of people think of the Leadership Institute, we think of the college students that we train. It's one of the most important things we do, training tomorrow's leaders. But one of the things in Grassroots we're doing is training people who are activists and candidates today. And in addition to that, we go someplace else. So the Grassroots School is a school that very rarely conducts training here. We're all over the country. In fact, I was just in Portland, Oregon, training about 88 conservatives this week. One of the things we talk about, the first thing we talk about is what's called the real nature of politics. And Morton came up with this. We always start off, the first thing we talk about is that being right in the sense of being philosophically correct isn't enough to win. Because we have a lot of good conservatives who come to our schools, and they're kind of wide-eyed, and they're passionate about the cause they believe in, and they're ready to go out there. But the first thing we need to tell them is that it's great that you're right, but being right in the sense of being philosophically correct isn't enough. You probably noticed behind me a picture of Ronald Reagan and Barry Goldwater. One of the things we teach them is that, Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan were nearly identical philosophically, but Ronald Reagan won by a landslide when Barry Goldwater got about 38% of the vote in a whopping 6 states. There's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is that Barry Goldwater and his people believed that being right was enough. And Ronald Reagan, by the time he came around, realized that training conservatives and having a lot of activists prepared and communicating and organizing was important. Also, we teach them a lot of voter contact. How do you go door to door effectively? How do you do voter mail? How do you use phones effectively on a campaign? We teach them public relations. How do you get your message out to the masses as a conservative, either on a campaign or in an organization? And we teach them fundraising. All these things you have to do take money. Money is the mother's milk of politics. So we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't teach them how do you raise that money. And you know, it wouldn't be possible without the faculty. We, as Morton said, I was I had a BS degree in political science from Shepherd College in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And I learned a lot of good stuff that really comes in handy at cocktail parties. You know, Demosthenes and, you know, who is Aristotle and all that good stuff. But I learned more in one Leadership Institute course than in terms of actually how to run a campaign and be effective than I did in 4 years of college. So it's no theory, it's nuts and bolts. And the way we do it is great men like Lynn Nofziger, who's here today, who you see behind me, who volunteer their time. And I noticed Paul Pelletier and a couple other faculty members who give their time for free to go around the country running grassroots schools. We owe them a debt of gratitude. As you'll see behind me, we're doing really, really well. Every year we've had the grassroots school, we train more and more students. Never gone backwards. And this year we're already, as you can see, halfway through the year, and we're at 978, already knocking on the door. So hopefully, and I'm confident that we will be able to have an even better year, as you know, as Ronald Reagan used to say, you ain't seen nothing yet. We had some great success last year in 2002. We had a school in Georgia where 25 of the people that we trained were elected, or in some cases re-elected. 15 of the people we trained in Georgia were elected for the first time to the Georgia State House. But that wasn't enough. You know, just training folks, conservatives, and having them get elected isn't enough. This year in 2003, we went back and trained them in fundraising techniques. So we're always keeping in touch with our graduates. I also wanted to take just a second to thank some of the people who make my job easy, the people who work in the grassroots department, Ty Bales, Megan Snyder, and Ben Malloy, who make my job easy, make me look good, and are mainly responsible for all those students we train. And as Morton said, I did want to thank the donors, and I would like to have a round of applause right now for the people who donate. Believe me when I say that I see that we're making a huge difference. Grassroots department has trained almost half of all the students at the Leadership Institute this year. And when I'm out on the road in Portland, Oregon, or Irvine, California, and I see a light bulb go off in these students' eyes, and they get it. And it's because of the donors that we're able to do that. So thank you very much for that. I just wanted to close with this quote from a student we just had at school, and this will give you an example. He says, "This is the building blocks that candidates need. I can't wait to attend the other classes I've registered for. LI has just become a major part of my campaign." From Major Dennis Hardy. That is the Grassroots Activist School. If I can ever be of assistance, do not hesitate to contact me. I'd love to talk to you and tell you more about it. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Matt. You're a star, and we're very pleased that you're working with us. Now we are coming to the main event for this breakfast. As you know, the Leadership Institute is a nonpartisan educational foundation, and we have people in a variety of parties up here. We've had a number of Democrats and a number of Republicans, and some people who have no particular party affiliation, but we got a really prominent member of one party here to speak. And to introduce that extraordinary speaker, who himself, by the way, has been for years a volunteer faculty member here at the Leadership Institute, to introduce him, Ty Bales. Ty is the director of grassroots coalitions here at the Leadership Institute, and he has helped train many thousands of conservative activists. In the fall of 2002, Ty was employed by the Republican National Committee's 72-hour task force to work on Mike Rogers' successful congressional race in the 3rd District of Alabama. Prior to joining the Leadership Institute, Ty worked for George Landreth for Congress campaign in Virginia's 5th District. He worked as an assistant to George Landreth. He also worked almost a decade ago now on Oliver North's Senate campaign here in Virginia, and did work with Senator George Allen when Senator Allen was governor of Virginia. Ty grew up in Charlottesville and is a graduate of Hampden-Sydney College. Ty?
Good morning. It's so great to see this room absolutely packed. And before I begin to introduce our speaker, I want to take a moment to thank Naomi Egerton Naomi's right outside. She's the young lady who's responsible for getting the word out and for helping us have such a great breakfast. And by the looks of it, this may be one of the largest Wednesday wake-up breakfasts we've had. So, Naomi, thank you very much for organizing this. It is a true honor. It's no surprise that so many people are here this morning, because this morning our speaker, I think, is a classic example of an American success story. Ed Gillespie began his career in 1985, trying to pay the rent. He worked as a parking lot attendant on the Senate side, and at night was a telemarketer in the basement of the RNC headquarters. Today his office is on the high rise on the top of that building. But it comes as no surprise. This is a person who believes in hard work and has got an uncanny political instincts and fundraising instincts. Raised himself from the basement to the top of the business world and the political world here in this country. I said in '85 he began working as a telemarketer. For the RNC, he then went to work with Congressman Dick Armey and climbed the ladder with Congressman Armey. In 1994, he helped Congressman Newt Gingrich draft the Contract with America. He showed up on President George W. Bush's radar screen and Karl Rove's radar screen in 2000, and he helped organize a very successful primary race for George W. Bush in Iowa. He later went on to run the convention for the Republican Party, and for George W. Bush in Philadelphia, was successful with that. This is a person who believes in organizational politics and understands the importance of grassroots politics. That's one reason why I'm so excited to have him here this morning. He ran a very successful Senate campaign last year for Elizabeth Dole, North Carolina, one of the most successful Senate campaigns in the history of North Carolina. He is founder of a very successful top 10 lobbying firm, the Quinn Gillespie & Associates. They represent some of the largest businesses and corporations in this country, including Microsoft and Verizon and other very large companies. It comes as no surprise that President George W. Bush has handpicked Mr. Ed Gillespie to lead his party. He has uncanny political instincts. He's a great strategist and a great fundraiser. It's a great honor for me to get to introduce Mr. Ed Gillespie, the next chairman of the Republican National Committee.
Thank you, Ty. Thank you all for being here this morning. I appreciate your being here so bright and early for the Wake Up Breakfast. As Ty mentioned, I have been a staffer at the Republican National Committee, was a staffer there actually about 6.5 years ago for former chairman, future governor, Haley Barbour, and then 18 years ago was in the basement phoning people, interrupting their dinner, asking them for money for the Republican National Committee. Can you give $100? How about 50? 25? Would that work in this case? And now I'm on the 4th floor, as Ty mentioned, calling people, asking them for money for the Republican National Committee, asking for a little bit more this time around. But it's a great honor and a privilege to be there. I'm honored by the President's faith in me. I hope that if the Republican National Committee members see fit in July to affirm that, I will be a full-time chairman, having left my firm to serve in this capacity. Morton Blackwell has publicly committed to me his support, and I appreciate that. And I'm talking to all of the RNC members and the state party chairs, because I do believe that the Republican Party functions best when we function as a bottom-up party. And I think that what's done here at the Leadership Institute excuse me, I'm sorry, I've just been notified that my microphone, this is better. The microphone came off of my tie clip. That the Leadership Institute, what is done here, is incredibly important. We have a president in President Bush who has generated an awful lot of energy and enthusiasm at the grassroots level. And I think translating that enthusiasm into votes is what matters most, and the Leadership Institute in its training programs does a great job in that regard. I also want to thank the donors, as has been done here this morning, and none of this is possible, obviously, without your contributions. We feel the same at the Republican National Committee. I'm proud to say that since George W. Bush took office, there are over 915,000 individuals who have become first-time donors to the Republican Party. They're excited by his positive agenda. They're excited by the efforts of the Republican House and the Republican Senate to improve our quality of life. They're excited by our Republican governors and that excitement is translating into donors and volunteers. Those donors, by the way, average less than $30 per contribution, and I think that's remarkable. We are a party of small donors, of small businesses, of grassroots, and I think that's one of the things that made us so successful in the last cycle. I'm optimistic about the coming election cycle. I think that we have a real opportunity with President Bush at the top of the ticket, and with all of the activity that we've done at the Republican National Committee, our work with our coalition partners, to pick up more seats in the House and the Senate, to have a big win at the top of the ticket, and to pick up more governorships out in the states. We can begin that this year, by the way. We have great opportunities in Mississippi. I mentioned Haley Barbour, the former chairman, running there. In Kentucky, we have a great opportunity there with Ernie Fletcher running. And in Louisiana, we'll have an open governor's seat, and I think we have a great opportunity there as well in this year, in '03, to pick up governorships. When you look at the nature of the Senate cycle, we have great opportunity there as well. There are more Democrat Senate seats to defend than Republican Senate seats, and when you look at where they are, there are great targets of opportunity. If you start right here on the East Coast, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, all opportunities for pickup for the Republican Party. On over to Arkansas, Nevada, South Dakota, North Dakota. We have fantastic opportunities to expand our margin in the Senate and then help to enact a positive agenda. The Senate right now has become the place where too often good bills go to die because of the obstructionist tactics of the Democratic minority there. Senator Frist has proven to be a very effective majority leader, and we've been able to move tax relief and expand access to affordable health care to America's seniors. But getting common sense judges confirmed for our backlogged courts has been a real challenge, obviously. And Democrats try to stop anything that moves in its tracks. And I think if we can expand our majority there, it will be helpful in moving forward a positive agenda. The House, as you know, is the bulwark of a positive agenda, moving great policies, constantly churning out bills that help protect the American people, that provide taxpayer relief. And I think that as the president makes his case in November, people will respond, as they have been doing, to his efforts to improve our quality of life, to reduce our dependence on foreign oil, to increase our 401k and college funds, to generate more and better jobs in America, and to prevail in the war against terror and protect our homeland from terrorist threats. I think that there is a very good reason that his numbers remain so strong, and that is because he has sought hard to change the tone in Washington to promote this vision and this positive viewpoint, and people are responding to it out across the country. There's nowhere in the country where we're not going to be viable and we're not going to be competitive. It's going to be a very wide-ranging playing field in this cycle, and I think that is to our advantage. When you look at the Democrats, I saw Jay Leno said recently that no one has fielded a team of 9 this week since the '62 Mets. I think that it's clear, though, that whoever emerges as the Democratic Party's nominee will be a viable candidate. We take nothing for granted, and we understand that the parties are virtually evenly divided right now, and that's what makes such grassroots activism so important to us. But I do think that with this positive agenda, we are going to win. I think there's a possibility we could win big, but we also are realistic and understand that we are likely to face a very closely and vigorously contested contest for the White House, as well as for the House and the Senate and the governorships. But we are up for the task. We're very much looking forward to it. I appreciate your allowing me to be here this morning, and I'm happy to take questions. So thank you very much, and I'll take questions. Yes, sir.
In 1994, President Clinton claimed that the gun issue, votes for gun control, cost his party control of the House and Senate. In 2000, Joe Lockhart wrote that the gun issue cost Al Gore the presidency. I was wondering, do you agree with those assessments, and what are your views on the Second Amendment as it relates to electoral politics?
The question is, what are my views on the Second Amendment rights as it relates to electoral politics, and an assessment by Joe Lockhart and others that in the past the gun issue has cost the Democrats seats. I think their assessment is probably accurate in that regard. I think that the fact is that when you look at Second Amendment rights as an issue, it is an issue that is often regional in nature, and I think that the Democrats strong push for gun control did hurt many of the rural members and led to them having to explain to their voters why it was their party was taking this position. I'm a proponent of Second Amendment rights. I don't own a gun myself, but I am fully in favor of others having that right. I wouldn't want to abridge it. And I think that most Americans are where conservatives are relative to that viewpoint. Yes, sir, in the middle. The question is, or the point made was that Republicans made great gains in the last cycle, and by the way, bucking all the trends in the historic midterm election for president in his first midterm, picking up seats in the House and the Senate. And part of the success was due to voter identification, voter turnout programs. And the question is, how are we going to approach that in this election cycle? I can tell you, as a senior advisor now, and hopefully soon to be chairman of the Republican National Committee, our emphasis is going to remain on grassroots. Elections are about people. Elections are about candidates and ideas and people and the voters. And communicating with the voters is the most important thing we can possibly do as a party, and not just through paid advertising. Direct contact, neighbor to neighbor, phone calls, mail, voter contact from candidates themselves, door to door, door hangers. I'm a strong proponent in that. I believe strongly in that. That is one of the reasons that Elizabeth Dole was so effective as a candidate. She too shared that view, and North Carolina got the greatest margin of victory in over 25 years there in this past cycle, in the most expensive race in the cycle last year. And that's because we never lost sight of the grassroots importance, the importance of grassroots. So we had, as many people here know and many participated in, at the Republican National Committee, a program called the 72-hour program last cycle, in which a lot of volunteers phoned their neighbors, knocked on doors, walked neighborhoods, and turned out the vote, identified voters who were likely to support Republicans up and down the ballot. And that did help to result in our wins, our historic win in 2000. As for what we're going to do with the 72-hour program in 2002, the only thing I intend to do with it is expand it to make it broader and bigger in more states and recruit more people into it. I'm for success, and this has been a very successful program, and we need to do more of it, and that's my intention going into this cycle. Yes, sir.
How important is the minorities vote for the next elections, particularly the Hispanics? There is a report, a recent report, that there is an increase about 10% of Hispanics that support President Trump.
The question is, how important is the minority vote, and specifically the Hispanic vote, in 2002? And the answer is, it's critically important. I believe that we have a great opportunity with our agenda, expanding affordable health care, improving public education, reducing our dependence on foreign oil, tax relief for working Americans and families, to increase our share of the vote amongst Latino voters, African American and Asian American voters as well. I think it's critically important to us when you look at the demographics. Hispanics now comprising the largest minority vote in the country. We have to increase our share there, and I think we will. I think we have an opportunity here to increase our vote with first and second generation Americans. I believe that legal immigrants to this country contribute strongly. Ronald Reagan said, I don't remember the exact quote, but said that people can move to Russia and never be Russian. You can move to Poland and never be Polish, but anyone can move to America and be an American. And people who come to this country with nothing but the clothes on their back are looking for opportunity. And I frankly speak from experience. My father is an immigrant, I'm proud to say, came to this country on a boat with nothing but the clothes on his back, worked as a janitor, became a small businessman, ultimately achieving every Irishman's dream, and bought a bar. And by dint of hard work, showed that first-generation Americans and immigrant Americans can succeed, and this is a country of opportunity. I believe that. I believe that message resonates with first generation, second generation, and third generation voters, and we need to aggressively go out and get those voters, get them to vote Republican. Yes, sir.
Whatever happened to your contract with America? You're so short-lived.
Yeah. The question is, whatever happened to the contract with America? And the answer is, it's the law of the land for most part today. You look at with the exception of the constitutional amendments, which are very difficult, obviously, to enact. The fact is that 65% of the provisions in the Contract of America were passed and ultimately signed into law. Again, this is an indication of, I think, a difference that you're seeing here. The Republican Party is the party of ideas. The Republican Party is the party of policies, putting forward a positive vision on how we can add momentum to our recovery, how we can improve the quality of life for working Americans, how we can improve our welfare system, and how we can improve our tax system. The Democrats today have become little more than a protest party. They're still protesting the president's election. They protest the war. They protest common sense judges on the courts. They protest tax relief. But it's hard to find anything that they're for. And until, as a party, and I believe in a two-party system, by the way. I'm for a vigorous contest. I'm for a Democratic Party in the minority, but they ought to be a Democratic Party. They ought to stand for something. And until they come forward with a positive agenda for the American people, I think they're going to have a hard time getting traction and getting resonance. That's likely to happen, I suspect, by the way, when they get a nominee. But in the meantime, you're hard-pressed to find anything that Democrats are for in America today. In the back, sir?
I read the Times that 65% of the dollars spent on medicine in this country are spent by Medicare. I'm looking at prescription drug money. It makes me really nervous to think that percentage is going to 80%, which sounds in fact does. We've got so much medicine.
The question is about the 65% of healthcare expenses paid by Medicare in the country today, and that number could go up if there's a prescription drug benefit added. There are different competing views on this, as you know. I think that the reforms and the modernization that were passed in the House and the Senate, there are various positive elements to both of the bills that I think can come together to make a very positive modernization bill for the Medicare system in this country. And I think that the fact is a prescription drug benefit can curtail hospital expenses and other costs in the Medicare system. And I am proud to say that it was a Republican House and a Republican Senate and a Republican President who have modernized this system, or in the process of modernizing the system, who are trying to provide this critical benefit to America's seniors. I think that Democrats, again, they chose to run on the issue rather than to solve the problem one too many times. And so Republicans came in and actually said, you know what, we're tired of the politics around this issue. We're actually going to do this. We're going to get this done, because we're the party that improves your quality of life. And I think that Democrats, if they had it to do over again, probably would like to go back, rewind the clock, and maybe Tom Daschle wouldn't have blocked that tripartisan bill in the last Congress and would have actually tried to get it done. But he didn't, and now today we have a Medicare, the prospect, given the House and Senate going to conference, with a very positive modernization program that instills and injects some market principles and competition into the program, and at the same time provide seniors with a prescription drug benefit. So I'm very optimistic about it. Yes, sir.
I think many of us have been reading that the campaign finance law seems to be working to the benefit of the Republicans, with the smaller hard money contributions to the detriment of Democrats who relied on the larger soft money contributions. Do you see that continuing to work to Republicans' benefit, and do you foresee any potential problems? I believe the Supreme Court is scheduled to hold hear arguments on that case, on those suits this fall. Depending on how they might rule on that, could that turn things upside down between now and fall 2004?
Now, the question is about campaign finance reform and its impact. The McCain-Feingold bill, and is it current perception is that it's benefiting the Republicans and disadvantaging Democrats because of the soft money ban, and what is the Supreme Court likely to do or going to do? Let me note a couple of things. One, as I mentioned, 915,000 and then some. Over 915,000, almost 1 million new donors to the Republican Party since George W. Bush took office. I don't know that I'm not sure if it's a Republican phenomenon or a President Bush phenomenon, but in either event, it's benefiting the party immensely right now, having those donors with an average contribution of under $30. The fact is that despite the Democrats talking about the Republican Party being the beneficiary of soft money, my soon-to-be counterpart, Terry McAuliffe, at the Democratic National Committee, knows full well that they got $20 million in the last cycle. $20 million from 3 donors. 3 donors gave the Democratic Party $20 million. 92% of the contributions of $1 million or $1 million or more went to the Democratic Party. 92% of the contributions of $1 million or more went to the Democratic Party. We are the party of small donors. We are the party of grassroots activism and energy. And I think that right now we are seeing that it is proving to our advantage in the federal dollars that are coming into the two parties, not only the Republican National Committee, but the congressional committees as well. That said, we haven't seen the outside groups start to play yet. Specifically, or we're starting to now. We're starting to see the Sierra Club and the League of Conservation Voters up with ads, misleading ads about the president's environmental record, and that money is just starting to kick in. The AFL-CIO is yet to kick in. Other of the liberal interest groups have yet to kick in with their money, and they'll start to even the playing field when they do. The unions aren't subject to the same regulations as you know under the law, so they have some advantages there. And the League of Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club, by the way, these environmental groups, it's worth noting the League of Conservation Voters came out with the recent ratings. You know that they rated a vote on campaign finance reform as an environmental vote. They rate abortion votes as an environmental vote. They did not rate the bipartisan brownfields vote as a bipartisan as an environmental vote, and they did not They did not rate the vote to protect Pacific salmon as an environmental vote. They are pure and simply a partisan organization masquerading as an environmental group. We're seeing that now as they run these ads misleading Americans about the president's environmental record. We'll see more of that over time. But at the end of the day, I believe that because of our ability to attract small donors and energize grassroots, that we will prevail under the new finance laws. As to your question about the Supreme Court, they will begin to consider this in an expedited fashion this summer, likely to see a decision sometime in November. And I think all of us over the past week have probably given up trying to guess what the court's going to do. And so we'll just wait to see as they interpret the law and what's constitutional, what's not, in its application. In the back.
How do you plan to convert California?
The question is, how do I plan to convert California? California, we are doing very well. We have a great converter out there in Gray Davis, by the way. But I was talking to Duff Sudheim, the state chairman in California, just last week, who told me that in San Bernardino County, over the course of 10 days, they registered 6,500 new voters in 10 days. 20% of those were party switchers, by the way. 20% of those 6,500 changed their registration from Democrat to Republican. My point earlier about the playing field being very broad and wide, I don't think there's a single state that we go into this cycle conceding right now, and certainly not California. And I believe that we have a great opportunity in California as well as Oregon and Washington State as well. Yes, sir.
What will the strategy be to target and defeat Dashiell?
The strategy to target and defeat Dashiell, Senator Dashiell is in cycle. He's in cycle in a presidential year in South Dakota. We have potentially a very strong candidate there in John Thune, who ran in the past cycle and almost beat Tim Johnson. So I think the strategy for beating Senator Dashiell is the same as the strategy for beating any other Democratic senator in cycle this year, which is to talk about our positive agenda, the things that we're trying to get done to help the American people and improve the quality of life for the American family, and to challenge him to explain what it is he's for. What are you for? I know what you're against. I hear it every day. I know what you're against. But what are you for? And let's compare those two things and see if what you're for versus what we're for is what the voters of South Dakota are for. I don't think they will be, by the way. Yes, sir.
What happened to the personal retirement accounts agenda that did so much for Elizabeth Dole?
The question is, what happened to the personal retirement accounts agenda? And thank you for noting it did so much for Elizabeth Dole. Look, I think that if you look at the way the issue of saving Social Security and allowing people personal retirement accounts played out in the last cycle, it's very, very encouraging for us. North Carolina is increasingly a retirement state. I'm going to guess that about, and I have to guess because of the VNS data, is gone. But I would say that probably between 25 and 27% of the voters in North Carolina last election day were 65 years or older. Democrats did what they always do. They tried to scare seniors about Social Security and tried to convince them that Elizabeth Dole was going to take away their Social Security. And I want to share an anecdote about Senator Dole, and I think is very interesting, which is that one of the first meetings that I was in with Elizabeth Dole, the pollster noted that she was on record as supporting personal retirement accounts to save Social Security, but he cautioned her that this is a state that is increasingly a retirement state in North Carolina, and that 1 out of 4 or more voters on election day were going to be senior citizens, and this was a potentially dangerous issue. And Elizabeth Dole never flinched. She said, we're just going to have to explain this to the voters. They need to understand it. And she got out front on it and campaigned hard on it. And at the end of the cycle, we got a disproportionate share of seniors, in my estimation, because they appreciated her courage. They appreciated her. When you explain the issue and talk about it, we win. And that wasn't true, by the way, only in North Carolina. It was also true John Sununu in New Hampshire and Jim Talent in Missouri, Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. And so I'm optimistic about this issue. And I believe that when we go out and we talk to voters about it and explain, when we use quotes from Democrats themselves, Al Gore is the one who said if you look at any 40-year period in American history, any 20-year period in American history, you'll see that the benefit to saving Social Security of private, allowing for some investment in the private sector of Social Security accounts is to its benefit. They chose, again, to be political as opposed to actually fix a problem. But I think voters are punishing people who are political rather than trying to fix problems in this day and age. And we're seeing that more and more. So I think that this is a great issue for us. Yes?
I have a question for you. You've obviously come from the basement of the RNC to being the next chairman. And we have a lot of young people at the Leadership Institute who work here and go through training. What advice would you give a young person that wants to be effective or successful in politics? What should they do that you did?
The question is, what advice would I give to those young people entering politics today to be successful? And my advice is really simple. I'm noted my starting in the basement and at the Senate parking lot, and I have been very fortunate to work for very good people in my career. I've worked for Andy Ireland, who changed parties, was a party switcher in 1984. I was with him when he changed from a Democrat to a Republican in the Reagan 84 cycle. I worked for Dick Armey for over 10 years, a man of great principle and vision. I worked for Haley Barbour, who I think is one of the most effective party chairmen on either side of the aisle we've seen in decades. Worked for John Kasich. I worked for President George W. Bush and Vice President Cheney. Worked for Elizabeth Dole. Politics is about principles, and it's about ideas, and it's about doing what's in the best interest of the American people. The best on the other side, by the way, believe the same thing. And it's only the cynics who, and we have some in our side too, who degrade the profession of politics. The fact is, it is a noble calling, and it is an honorable profession when done properly and when done right. And I think, so if I were to give advice, I would say just believe in your principles and your ideas, believe in the candidates for whom you work, and work hard for them, and understand that when it comes to politics, no matter how far you go, you're always going to stuff envelopes, and if you're going to get it done right. And so I would say those things I think are most important. Hard work, be respectful, honor the voters, and generally, the political system is a great meritocracy. It's a great meritocracy. As I mentioned, come from my father is an immigrant. I did not come from a political family, but by getting involved in campaigns and going out and hanging door hangers and putting on bumper stickers and knocking on doors and calling people and asking them to contribute, you can rise. And so I think it's as great a profession to be in terms of getting ahead by virtue of hard work and merit. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Talk a little bit about the issue of health insurance for the uninsured and how big of an issue you think that'll be in the campaign.
Uninsured?
The uninsured, and we've seen the Democratic candidates come out with these huge programs, and if there's going to be sort of a counter on your side.
Yeah, the question is the uninsured and health insurance availability in this country and what kind of an issue that is. I think it's an important issue. I think we have a great approach to it. I think the Democrats' big government bureaucracy approach, sometimes it's like that 70s show. You look back and they're doing it again, and they're going to create this great massive structure to have a government-run health care system in America, and I just don't think the voters are going to accept that. But I do think voters do care about access to insurance and health care. I think that the prescription drug benefit that the Republican Congress and the President have promoted goes a long way in helping people meet their health care concerns. But there's more we can do in terms of providing access. I think that allowing people to risk pool, to allow small businesses to join together to form risk pools for health insurance will help expand insurance. I think that if we could just weed out the frivolous lawsuits from the system and stop these lawyers from running good doctors out of town. It's hard in some communities to find an OBGYN because of the healthcare, their insurance costs, their liability exposure is so great that they're afraid to practice anymore. In North Carolina in the last election, we had one doctor who left being a general practitioner, closed his office, and went to teach at a university, to teach medicine at a university because it was safer to teach it than to practice it. That's just plain wrong. And we need to fix that system. The Senate is going to take up a medical liability measure when they come back from the July 4th Independence Day district work period. I hope that it's passed, but the trial lawyers have such sway over the Democrats in the Senate that, again, you might see them trying to obstruct that important measure from being passed. But I think we have a very positive agenda to expand access to affordable health care in this country, and it's something we're going to run on vigorously in 2004. Ty?
In your rise the last 20 years, who are some of the people you've studied, and what are some of the best books you've read?
That's interesting. In my rise, what are some of the best books and some of the best people? Again, the people I mentioned are all people of principle, whom I admire greatly. So I obviously would begin with them. In terms of books, I mean, to me, Michael Novak's The Spirit of Democratic Capitalism was probably the most important book I read, again, on the premise that politics is about ideas, and I think that's a fantastic, still today, a fantastic initial book. I think there's for the Hill, there's an old book called The Dance of Legislation by Eric Redmond. That is a very good book still today about the legislative process. It's kind of hard to find, but still a good book in that regard. I think Chris Matthews has a great book in Hardball, and I commend that to people. And so those are just some that come immediately to mind. Lynn's book, worth getting, and so those are some that come immediately to my mind. Yes, sir.
Some of the ridiculous rulings that came out of the Supreme Court in the last week demonstrate how critical it is that President Bush's nominees to the federal bench be confirmed. What further strategic or other things can be done to overcome the invalid blockage by the Democrats in the Senate getting good people to the federal judiciary?
The question is, what can we do to further build pressure on Senate Democrats to allow for the president's judicial nominations to go forward? And I think we just have to stay on it. It is the way the Senate Democrats are treating Miguel Estrada's nomination is abominable. It's an abomination. And the more that we can go out and talk to voters about it, the more we can explain that these courts are getting increasingly backlogged, that justice delayed is justice denied, that what the Democrats are clearly trying to do here is make sure that the only judges that will ever get confirmed are judges who will be activists from the bench, who will legislate from the bench, who will raise taxes from the bench, who have no respect for private property or Second Amendment rights, who want to interfere with local communities, school boundaries, that they are determined to stock the federal bench with liberal activists, and they're going to stop anything and anyone who doesn't comport with that view. And it's something I think that the voters more and more are coming to understand, and I just think we just need to bring these votes up as often as we can, make the Democrats block it, let the American people see what they're doing, because it will not withstand the harsh light of day.
One more question.
One more question? All the way toward the back.
Stand up.
The question is, under ideal circumstances, with Republicans in control of the House and the Senate, are there items in the budget that the Republicans will cut? And we'll see that here soon. The appropriations season is soon upon us. July is when the House and the Senate begin to move their appropriations bills. We have competing demands in the budget. I think that the importance of Homeland Security is paramount, obviously, and winning the war against terror, supporting our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, and those priorities are going to command a lot of resources. At the same time, we have priorities on the domestic front that need to be met as well. Some of the priorities I mentioned in terms of health care, and there's a transportation infrastructure bill. As a conservative, I believe that investing in capital investment in our roads is not alien to our view of government, and that needs to be done. So I'm not sure how, as the appropriations process plays out, where these trade-offs are going to come into play. But we'll see trade-offs. Believe me, by the time the appropriations bills are done, Democrats will howl over what they perceive to be terrible cuts in various programs. Those cuts will be Washington cuts, by the way. It will be a reduced rate of growth. But you'll hear plenty of Democratic outrage over the Republican priorities, because they don't have to establish priorities. I don't know if they would, even if they were in the majority. They talk about the deficit and the tax relief that they say the deficit is causing, that is a result of the tax relief. But the fact is, when you look at their votes and the amendments that they offered, for every dollar in tax relief that Republicans passed, they proposed $1.33 in new federal spending. The deficit would have been higher had the Democrats been in control and their amendments to increase spending passed than we have with the tax relief. And the tax relief is going to, in the end, create economic growth and generate revenue that's going to create surpluses. Surpluses don't create economic growth. Economic growth creates surpluses. And the tax relief package will foster that. More Washington spending on pet projects and programs would not have done that. So I think you will see these trade-offs play out on the House and Senate floor, but the broader point should never be lost, and we need to keep reinforcing it. Thank you all very much for your time this morning. I appreciate you letting me be here. Thank you, Morton.
Ed, thank you so much for taking time out in your now increasingly busy schedule to address us this morning. Is that working? Okay, good. As a little token of our appreciation, I'm going to give you what I know is a familiar item to you, because during the 10 years that you worked for Congressman Dick Armey, you often saw him wearing Adam Smith ties. He was a faithful wearer of it, and I present to you an Adam Smith tie, which we produce here at the Leadership Institute.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us on Wednesday, August 6th for our next Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast, the first Wednesday of every month. And our special guest and honored speaker will be one of the most extraordinarily effective and interesting women in the conservative movement, Becky Norton Dunlop, Vice President of the Heritage Foundation. Those of you who would like a tour of the building, and I know we have some guests here who are visiting us for the first time, if you would come up over in this general area, and at the conclusion of the breakfast, Danielle Walker, who is a development intern here, will give you a tour of the whole building from stem to stern. So join Danielle over there. Thank you very much and have a good day.